Lena Hartwell learned 2 things the week she buried her father. Grief is loud in a quiet house, and being the good daughter doesn't count for much once lawyers open folders. She stood in the back of the living room, the one that still smelled like lemon polish and oxygen, while strangers in black shook hands with her brother as if he were the bereaved. Robert, tailored suit, effortless smile, worked the crowd like a candidate. Lena had spent the last 2 years changing dressings, timing medications, and coaxing soup into trembling hands. Robert had spent them in Manhattan, building something impressive and far away. A noble sacrifice, someone murmured to her, patting her shoulder without meeting her eyes. Robert's laugh drifted over the low hum of condolences. "Lena's sensitive," he told a woman with diamonds in both ears. "Never had much ambition, but she's got a good heart." Sensitive. As if that were a flaw. As if 3 a.m. sheets and chemo days were acts of sentiment instead of spine. Mrs. Henderson from next door found Lena in the kitchen, elbows deep in casserole dishes. "Your father bragged about you," she said, drying a plate. "Said you were stronger than anyone knew." Something inside Lena steadied at that, like a picture frame finally set level. 8 months earlier, on a rare good morning, her father had tapped a stack of papers on his desk. "If anything happens," he rasped, "promise me you won't let Robert make decisions alone. Go to Mr. Mitchell first." His hand had squeezed hers with fading strength. "There are things your brother doesn't know." Now, after the last guest left and Robert retreated to a hotel because the house felt too heavy, Lena sat in the dim study where bedtime stories had once lived. The clock ticked like it was counting down. She scrolled to Mr. Mitchell's number, thumb hovering, then pressed send. "Lena," the lawyer replied almost instantly. "I've been waiting for your call. Come tomorrow at 2. She set the phone down and listened to the house breathe, vents sighing, floorboards settling, grief rotating through the rooms. Outside, the porch light haloed the driveway where Robert's BMW had idled like a visit from a future that didn't include her. Sensitive. Maybe. But her father hadn't asked for sentiment. He'd asked for judgment, for patience, for a promise. Tomorrow at 2, the folders would open. And for the first time since the machines went silent, Lena felt something other than loss. Resolve. The law office smelled like varnish, dust, and old decisions. Lena sat across from Mr. Mitchell, her father's lawyer for as long as she could remember. He looked older than he had at the funeral, paper-skinned, his spectacles low on his nose, but his eyes were sharp. "Your father trusted you," he began, folding his hands. "And he prepared for this moment carefully." Lena leaned forward. "He told me to come to you before Robert made any decisions. He said there were things my brother didn't know." Mr. Mitchell nodded slowly. He was right. Frank Hartwell loved you both, but he worried about Robert's impulses, his tendency to treat family assets like stock trades. That's why he kept certain matters private until now. He pulled a thick folder from his drawer, its edges frayed from years of handling. When he opened it, Lena saw signatures, maps, and typed contracts stamped with an unfamiliar logo. Mountain View Mining Corporation. "What's this?" she asked. 15 years ago, Mitchell said. "Your father quietly leased the mineral rights beneath the family's farmland. The payments from those leases kept his construction company alive during hard years. He didn't tell Robert because he feared he'd demand a sale instead of a lease, and that would have destroyed the long-term potential." Lena blinked. "Mining? We barely have hills, let alone minerals." "At first, it was just exploratory," Mitchell explained. "But your father's caution paid off. The company discovered valuable rare earth elements. A few months before he passed, they made a preliminary offer to buy the rights outright, for $65 million. Lena felt her pulse thunder in her ears. $65 million? Plus royalties for 25 years, Mitchell added, his voice calm but heavy. "Your father believed the royalties would secure your family for generations, but he also knew Robert would see only quick cash. So he restructured everything to protect that vision." He pushed a second folder toward her. Thicker, darker, marked private correspondence. Vincent Torres. "I remember that name," Lena said. "Dad mentioned him once. His business partner? Mitchell's expression hardened. Former partner. Torres embezzled close to $2 million over 3 years. When your father found out, he gathered evidence but chose not to prosecute. Why not? Lena demanded. Because Torres threatened to expose the mining lease to Robert. If that happened, the deal would have collapsed. Early termination clauses, legal chaos, millions lost. Your father bought Torres out quietly, using borrowed money against future lease payments. He sacrificed short-term stability to protect your inheritance. Lena sat frozen. He never said a word. He didn't want you to carry that burden, Mitchell said gently. But it came at a cost. The company's recent struggles, the debts, those were consequences of buying Torres's silence. She felt the weight of her father's exhaustion in every page. He was protecting us from everything, even each other. Mitchell gave a faint smile. That was his way. And there's something else you should know. He opened one last envelope and slid a letter across the desk. Your father rewrote his will 6 months ago. He asked me to keep this sealed until after the funeral. Lena's eyes skimmed the first lines, her throat tightening at the familiar handwriting. My dearest Lena, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But the decisions I've made were not born from favoritism. They were born from trust. Her hands trembled. He knew this would cause a war, she whispered. Perhaps, Mitchell said, leaning back. But he believed you would fight the right one. Lena closed the letter, the paper still warm from her touch. Through the office window, the afternoon light slanted across the floor like a dividing line, between what her father had hidden and what she was about to uncover. For the first time, she understood. The real inheritance wasn't land or money. It was responsibility, and tomorrow, when the will was read, that responsibility would become her weapon, and her test. The next morning, the air around the law office felt tense, charged, like the moment before a summer storm. Lena arrived 10 minutes early, her palms damp despite the chill. Through the frosted glass of the conference room, she could already see Robert pacing, designer suit, perfect posture, flanked by 2 lawyers who looked like they'd stepped out of a corporate battlefield. Lena, he greeted, his tone somewhere between a smirk and a warning. Glad you could make it. We've been reviewing some concerns about Dad's recent decisions. Concerns? Lena repeated flatly. One of his lawyers, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper cheekbones, spoke before Robert could. Our client has reason to believe that your father's mental capacity may have been compromised during the final months of his illness. Lena's breath caught. You're saying Dad wasn't competent? It's standard precaution, Robert interjected, pretending calm. Dad was medicated. Painkillers, chemo, it affects judgment. We just want to make sure everything was fair. Before Lena could respond, the door opened and Mr. Mitchell entered, carrying a single heavy envelope. His eyes flicked from Robert to the lawyers and then to Lena, where they softened slightly. We'll begin now, he said simply. The room fell silent, except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Your father anticipated this, Mitchell said, adjusting his glasses. He left very clear instructions to address any questions about his capacity. He reached into his briefcase and produced a sealed folder. This is a psychiatric evaluation, dated 4 months before his death, conducted by Dr. Sarah Chen. Robert's lawyer reached for it, flipping through the pages. Her confident expression faltered. Dr. Chen confirmed that Mr. Hartwell was fully competent to make complex legal and financial decisions, Mitchell continued. Furthermore, your father recorded his reasoning for all changes made to his will. He pressed a small recorder on the desk. A familiar, fragile voice filled the room. This is Frank Hartwell, their father said, his tone calm, steady despite the rasp in it. I am changing my will because I have discovered financial risks and information my son Robert does not understand. I've also learned he has maintained communication with Vincent Torres, the man who embezzled from our company. Lena felt Robert stiffen beside her. What? Robert's voice cracked. That's ridiculous, Mitchell pressed pause. Would you like me to continue? Robert clenched his jaw. Go ahead. The recording resumed. I love both my children, Frank's voice went on. But I've seen how Robert's ambition blinds him. Lena has shown patience, integrity, and judgment. My decisions are not about favoritism. They're about protection. The recording clicked off. Silence. Lena could feel Robert's anger radiating like heat. "This is manipulation," he snapped. Dad was confused. He must have been influenced. Mr. Mitchell ignored the outburst and opened the envelope. "As executor, I will now read the final will and testament of Mr. Frank Hartwell." He began, his voice measured, legalistic but steady. "To my son, Robert Hartwell, who has built a name for himself in New York. I leave Hartwell Construction and all related business assets, including equipment and ongoing contracts. However, this inheritance is subject to a 5-year management restriction previously signed by Robert, which prevents any sale or merger of company assets during that time." Robert blinked. "What management restriction?" Mitchell looked him dead in the eye. "The document you signed last year. Your estate attorney advised it was routine paperwork. It wasn't. It ensures stability in the transition period." Robert's lawyers leaned in, whispering urgently. Mitchell continued reading. "To my daughter, Lena Hartwell, who has shown unwavering loyalty, sound judgment, and compassion, I leave the family farmhouse and the adjoining 47 acres of property, including full ownership of the mineral rights and any active or pending business agreements related to those rights." Lena froze. "Mineral rights." The words seemed to echo, bouncing around her chest until they settled like a heartbeat. "That's it?" Robert's voice rose. "She gets a rundown farm, and I get a business I can't even touch for 5 years? How is that fair?" "Actually," Mitchell said quietly, sliding another document across the table, "there's more. Your father requested transparency about the assets attached to each inheritance." He opened the geological survey, revealing the familiar outlines of their land streaked with multicolored mineral zones. 3 months ago, Mountain View Mining completed a survey, Mitchell explained. They found significant deposits of rare earth minerals. They've already offered $65 million, with royalties estimated at an additional $15-20 million over the next 25 years. The color drained from Robert's face. $85 million? He whispered. "On her property?" Lena said nothing. She could feel his fury pressing against her like a physical force. Robert turned on her. "You can't seriously think you can handle that kind of negotiation. You're not equipped for this, Lena. "What I have," she interrupted softly, "is Dad's trust. Maybe that's worth more than your resume." His lips tightened into a bitter line. "You manipulated him while he was sick." Mr. Mitchell slammed the folder shut. "Enough." He reached for one final document. "Your father's decision was final. Contesting this will would be a mistake, Robert, especially considering the evidence he left regarding your communication with Torres." Robert looked startled. "What evidence?" Mitchell's eyes were cold now. "Emails, business proposals, and recordings, all showing your intent to bring Torres back as a consultant once you inherited the company." Robert's voice cracked. "I didn't know exactly," Mitchell said sharply. "You didn't want to know." Lena looked at her brother, the man who had always stood taller, talked louder, acted smarter, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid of him. Their father had left her a farmhouse, some soil, and a secret buried deep beneath it. But what he'd really left her was power. And Robert had just learned what that meant. After the reading, the air in the conference room felt electric, too heavy for words, too charged for calm. Robert's lawyers packed up in silence, leaving only the siblings and Mr. Mitchell behind. The lawyer waited until the door clicked shut before unlocking another drawer. "Your father wanted me to share this next part privately," he said, sliding a thick folder across the desk. "It concerns Vincent Torres, and what nearly destroyed your family business." Lena braced herself as Mitchell opened the file. Photocopies of bank statements, email chains, and transfer logs spread across the polished wood like the anatomy of a betrayal. "Torres was your father's business partner for nearly 15 years, Mitchell began. "On paper, he was brilliant, sharp, ambitious, connected. But 4 years ago, your father discovered he had been diverting funds from company accounts into shell corporations he controlled." "How much?" Lena asked quietly. "Almost $2 million, Robert swore under his breath. Mitchell ignored him. "Your father documented everything, but instead of pressing charges, He negotiated a private buyout. It cost him nearly all the company's reserves. Torres agreed to disappear and stay silent about the mining deal. Robert frowned. Why protect him? Dad should have had him arrested, Mitchell sighed. Because Torres threatened to expose the lease before your father could secure future payments. If he had, Mountain View would have pulled the contract, and the family could have lost everything. Frank chose the long game, protecting legacy over vengeance. Lena stared at the papers, at her father's neat handwriting marking every stolen dollar. He carried this alone, she whispered. All while pretending things were fine. Mitchell nodded. He was planning to tell you after his final treatments, but when he realized time was short, he made sure I had the full record, to protect you both. Robert leaned forward, his voice unsteady. Does Torres know about the mineral rights? No, Mitchell replied firmly. And he can't. If he finds out, he'll come back. He's been under quiet investigation for similar crimes in 3 other states, manipulating families during inheritance transitions. The FBI is watching him. The word investigation seemed to echo through the room. Lena's pulse quickened. So he's still out there? Yes, Mitchell said gravely. And if he ever reaches out to either of you, don't answer. Call me. Call the authorities. Lena met her brother's uneasy gaze. For the first time, Robert didn't look superior. He looked scared. And Lena realized their father hadn't just been protecting the family fortune. He'd been protecting them from the kind of man who could destroy everything they loved. That night, the farmhouse was still. The scent of lilacs from her father's favorite tree drifted through the window as Lena sat at his desk, the same one where she'd once done homework while he worked late. The manila envelope Mr. Mitchell had given her lay before her, sealed and marked in her father's familiar handwriting. For Lena, when the time is right. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal. Inside were several documents, a small brass key, and a handwritten letter dated 6 months before his death. My dearest Lena, if you're reading this, it means Mr. Mitchell has told you the truth about Torres and the mining rights. I want you to understand that my decisions were never about choosing between my children. They were about trust. Robert has brilliance, but not patience. You have both, and patience is what will save this family. Lena's eyes blurred with tears as she continued reading. Torres is dangerous, clever, and desperate. He has already approached Robert, disguising his intentions as business advice. He's feeding your brother ideas, grooming him to open the door I closed. When I realized that, I began documenting everything. Every email, every call, every transfer. Her heart pounded. The brass key glinted under the lamp. You'll find what I couldn't say in the basement safe behind the old water heater. The combination is your mother's birthday. Use it only if you must. Inside are 3 things. Proof of Torres's crimes, evidence of Robert's involvement, unintentional though it may be, and one final document that will protect you if your brother ever tries to contest the will. She pressed the paper to her chest. He'd known. He'd seen every crack forming before the rest of them even noticed. Please remember, my sweet girl, wealth can be rebuilt, but trust cannot. You'll be tempted to hate Robert for his arrogance, but don't. He's been manipulated. Protect him, even from himself. And if Torres resurfaces, contact Mr. Mitchell immediately. He's been instructed to reach the FBI. Be cautious. Lena. Greed makes desperate men dangerous. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but beneath the sorrow was a growing steel. I love you more than my words can say. You were my strength when my body failed me, and now you must be the strength of this family. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. Her father's signature, firm, certain, closed the letter. Lena rose from the desk and made her way down the creaking basement stairs. Dust swirled in the beam of her flashlight. The safe was exactly where he'd said, hidden behind the water heater, the metal cool under her fingertips. She entered her mother's birthday, await more tour. The lock clicked. Inside were 3 folders, and a 4th item that made her breath catch. A signed letter from Robert to Vincent Torres. An agreement to restructure Hartwell Construction for maximum efficiency and future profitability. Dated 2 weeks before their father's death. Her knees weakened. Robert hadn't just been manipulated. He'd been preparing to hand everything over, and their father had known it. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, the kind of sky that made even the birds sound tired. Lena sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee. The letter from the safe spread out before her like a confession she didn't want to read again. The knock came at 7:01 a.m. sharp. When she opened the door, Robert stood on the porch, looking nothing like the smug executive from the will reading. His tailored coat was wrinkled, his eyes rimmed red, his tie gone. He looked human. "Lena," he said, voice rough. "Can I come in?" She hesitated before stepping aside. "If you're here to argue about the will, don't. I've read Dad's letter." "I know everything." Robert blinked, startled. "Everything?" "About the mining rights, the lease, and Torres," he exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Then you know how badly I messed up." Lena didn't answer. She just poured another cup of coffee and slid it across the table. He took it like a peace offering he didn't deserve. "I didn't know Torres was dirty," Robert said after a moment. "He reached out months ago, talking about modernizing the company, expanding into new projects. He sounded legitimate. I thought maybe Dad had been too stubborn to see his potential." Lena's voice was steady. "You thought you were smarter than him." He winced. "Yeah, I did." Silence filled the room, thick but not hostile. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the window panes, carrying the faint smell of wet soil and lilac. "I read Dad's notes," Lena said softly. "He didn't hate you, Robert. He just didn't trust you to see the difference between ambition and greed. Torres knew that. He used it." Robert's gaze dropped to his hands. "I almost sold our company to him." Lena pushed a folder across the table, the letter from the safe. "You didn't almost. You agreed, 2 weeks before Dad died." His face drained of color. "You found that?" "I found everything." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Robert swallowed hard. "I don't even remember signing it. He caught me after a bad call with a client. Said he could help refinance, stabilize things before Dad passed. I was desperate." Lena studied him. The arrogance she'd hated for years wasn't there anymore, just shame. "Dad forgave you before he died," she said finally. "He just didn't tell you because he didn't want Torres to see weakness." Robert's eyes glistened. "He forgave me? He told me to protect you, even from yourself." That broke him. His shoulders shook as he hid his face in his hands, and for the first time since childhood, Lena saw her brother cry. Not from anger, from guilt, from grief, from understanding. When he finally looked up, his voice was quiet. "I want to fix this, Lena, all of it. The company, our family, everything Torres tried to poison. If you'll let me," she studied him, the man who once dismissed her as sensitive. Now he looked small, but sincere. "Then start by being honest," she said. "No more secrets. No more pretending you know best. We rebuild together or not at all." Robert nodded, eyes shining. "Deal." For the first time in years, Lena smiled. A small, weary smile, but real. "I'll need your help with the mining negotiations," she said, gathering the papers. "Mountain View is sending representatives next week. It's bigger than anything I've ever handled." "Then we'll handle it together," Robert replied. "No shortcuts this time." He rose from his chair and glanced toward the old study door. "I'll move into Dad's room," he said quietly. Might as well start where he left off. As he disappeared down the hall, Lena felt a strange calm settle over her. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt alive, heavy with history, yes, but also with the fragile sound of something being mended. For the first time, they weren't rivals or heirs. They were family, and neither of them knew it yet. But their truce would soon be tested, because Vincent Torres wasn't finished with them. The peace between Lena and Robert lasted barely 3 days. It ended with a phone call. The number was blocked. The voice smooth, too smooth. "Ms. Hartwell," it said, "this is Vincent Torres. I believe we need to discuss your recent windfall." Lena froze. Across the kitchen, Robert mouthed, "Don't engage." But curiosity, and something colder, pushed her forward. "I'm listening," she said, Putting the call on speaker, Torres chuckled softly. Smart girl. You've inherited quite an opportunity, but you're out of your depth. Managing mineral rights worth tens of millions requires expertise. Mine, for instance. You're offering your services? Call it guidance, for a modest 15% consulting fee. In exchange, I guarantee you'll earn double what Mountain View Mining offered. Robert's knuckles whitened. He's bluffing, he whispered. Lena's tone remained calm. And if I say no? Torres's voice cooled. Then perhaps certain irregularities in your father's accounting might attract unwanted government attention. The IRS loves stories like his. It was blackmail. Clean, practiced, venomous. Lena took a slow breath. You're right, Mr. Torres. Some things are better discussed face to face. Why don't you come by the farmhouse at 2 o'clock? Robert's eyes went wide. Lena, are you insane? But she was already dialing Mr. Mitchell. Within the hour, the lawyer arrived, with 2 unannounced guests. Detective Sarah Martinez from the State Fraud Division and FBI agent David Park. Torres has been on our radar for 18 months, Park explained. He preys on families like yours, exploiting inheritance transitions. This might be our chance to catch him in the act. Robert looked uneasy. So, we're bait? Protected bait, Martinez assured. We'll monitor everything. When he tries to solicit or threaten, that's enough for an arrest. At exactly 2 o'clock, Torres arrived, sharp suit, tired eyes, the faint air of a man who'd survived too many lies. Ms. Hartwell, he greeted with oily charm. I knew your father well. He was a visionary, if not always practical. Come in, Lena said evenly. We can talk here. Torres barely had time to glance around before Agent Park stood from behind the kitchen counter, badge flashing. Vincent Torres, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, and extortion. The confidence drained from his face as the handcuffs clicked. You have no idea who you're dealing with. He spat. Lena folded her arms. Actually, she said quietly, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. As the agents let him out, Robert whispered, You set him up. No, she replied, watching Torres disappear through the doorway. I just gave him the stage, and let the truth do the rest. The farmhouse fell silent again. But this time it wasn't the stillness of loss. It was victory, and neither of them knew it yet. But this victory was only the beginning, because the real test would come when the millions arrived. 3 days after Torres's arrest, the driveway of the Hartwell farmhouse looked like a business convention. 3 black SUVs rolled up in a perfect line, doors opening in unison. Out stepped a team of men and women in tailored suits, carrying briefcases and thick binders, embossed with Mountain View Mining Corporation. Lena had been preparing for this moment for weeks, reading, researching, losing sleep over mineral law and contract structures. But when she opened the door to greet them, her voice was steady. Good morning. I'm Lena Hartwell. Please come in. Dr. Sarah Chen, the company's lead negotiator, elegant, mid-40s with sharp intelligence in her eyes, extended a hand. Ms. Hartwell, thank you for meeting with us. We're very excited about your property's potential. Robert stood beside Lena, notebook in hand, trying to look like someone who hadn't nearly sold their father's company to a criminal. They settled in the study, her father's old domain, now cleared of personal items, replaced by folders and legal pads. The faint smell of cedar and ink hung in the air. Dr. Chen began with an unexpected tone of honesty. Before we discuss numbers, I want to clarify the realities of mineral extraction. Mining is complicated, environmentally, legally, logistically. Our initial offer of $65 million is based on current surveys, but several factors could affect profitability. Robert raised an eyebrow. You're trying to lower your own price? Chen smiled slightly. I'm trying to avoid lawsuits later. We prefer partners who understand what they're agreeing to. Lena liked her immediately. They spent hours going over projections, environmental impact reports, and royalty breakdowns. Each time Chen spoke, her precision reminded Lena of her father. Deliberate, fair, never rushing a conclusion. Finally, Chen slid a thick contract across the table. This is our formal offer. $65 million for full ownership of the mineral rights. Alternatively, we can discuss a hybrid model, $40 million upfront, plus 15 to 20% royalties over 25 years, potentially worth over $80 million total. Robert whistled under his breath. That's considerable. Lena flipped through the document, her eyes scanning the clauses she'd memorized from her late-night readings. And the risks? She asked. Environmental regulations, market fluctuations, extraction costs. All manageable, Chen replied. But you should take time. Have your lawyer and an independent mineral rights expert review this thoroughly. We can give you 60 days. Lena nodded slowly. You're being very transparent. Your father was the same, Chen said softly. He believed long-term trust was more valuable than fast money. I can see that same quality in you. The words landed like a quiet benediction. When the Mountain View team finally departed, dusk had settled over the fields. Lena and Robert sat on the porch steps, the draft agreement between them. The cicadas hummed in the distance, steady and rhythmic, like a heartbeat under the night air. Robert tapped the papers. The hybrid offer makes sense. Enough cash to stabilize everything now, steady income later. But are you sure you're ready to handle something this big? Lena stared toward the fading light over the hills. Dad didn't think I was ready either, not at first. But he trusted I'd learn, Robert exhaled. Then maybe it's time we both learned, she smiled faintly. We will. Together. Inside, her father's old clock chimed 7 times, the sound echoing through the house like a reminder of time, legacy, and the choices yet to come. For the first time since his death, Lena didn't feel like the caretaker or the underdog. She felt like an equal, an heir not just to money, but to responsibility. But somewhere, beneath that calm, a new unease stirred, because men like Vincent Torres didn't disappear quietly. And if the mining deal was really worth what the numbers suggested, someone else would come looking for a piece of it. And this time, Lena would have to be ready. 2 weeks after the meeting with Mountain View, Lena thought the worst was behind them. The deal was progressing smoothly. The FBI had Torres in custody, and for the first time in months, she was sleeping without nightmares. Then Robert appeared in the kitchen one morning, clutching a newspaper. His face was pale. Lena, he said, dropping it onto the table. The headline read, Business Consultant Vincent Torres, linked to multi-state fraud ring. Beneath it was a grainy photo of Torres in handcuffs, and a list of other companies ruined by him. Robert's voice shook. He didn't just steal from us. He's been doing this for years. Families, inheritance disputes, small construction firms. The same pattern every time. Lena skimmed the article. He targeted people during grief. People trying to rebuild. Exactly. He researched families like ours, Robert said. Found out when aging business owners were sick or dying. Then he'd reach out to their children, pretend to help, and take everything. Lena felt her stomach tighten. How many victims? At least 7? Maybe more. He paused. And here's the part that scares me. He didn't work alone. What do you mean? Robert unfolded a second clipping. The FBI thinks Torres had a network. Investors, fake consultants, relatives posing as intermediaries. They handled the paperwork while he made contact. The name that keeps popping up is David Wu. His nephew. Lena's mind flashed back to Torres's threats about European mining offers and higher bidders. A cold realization crept in. He's not done. Even from jail, he's going to try something. That afternoon, her phone rang. The caller identified herself as Jennifer Torres. My ex-husband is in custody, the woman said bluntly, but his associates aren't. He's already trying to reach you through them. I thought you should know. Lena hesitated. Why are you warning me? Because he destroyed my family too, Jennifer said. 15 years ago, he ruined my father's business the same way. I want to make sure he never does it again. When the call ended, Lena sat staring at the phone, her pulse pounding. Torres might have been behind bars, but his web was still spinning, invisible, reaching, hungry. And now, it was stretching toward her. By the time Mountain View's representatives returned to finalize the agreement, Lena thought she had prepared for everything. Legal reviews, contract revisions, security checks. Everything but the one thing she should have expected: Vincent Torres's last move. The morning of the signing, Robert met her in the driveway, his face grim. "Lena, we have a problem," he said, holding his phone. "Torres escaped from county jail last night." The world seemed to tilt for a moment. "How? Inside help. His nephew, David Wu, disappeared the same night." Robert's voice was tight. "The FBI says they're on the run. Park told me to delay the signing until they're found." Lena looked toward the law office, where the Mountain View convoy was already pulling in. She remembered her father's words. "Don't let fear make your decisions for you." "No," she said firmly. "We're going ahead. Once the contract is signed, there's nothing left for him to steal." Inside the conference room, Dr. Chen greeted them with her calm, professional smile. "Ms. Hartwell, if you're ready, we can proceed." The signing took nearly 2 hours. Each page was reviewed, every clause confirmed. The last signature felt like the closing of a chapter. "Congratulations, Ms. Hartwell," Dr. Chen said warmly. "You're now $40 million richer, with royalties to follow once extraction begins." Before Lena could reply, the door burst open. The receptionist stood trembling. "Mr. Mitchell, there's a man demanding to see Ms. Hartwell. He says it's urgent." Dr. Chen frowned. "Who?" "Vincent Torres." The room went dead silent. Robert half rose. "Call the police." But Lena's voice cut through. "No, let him in." Torres stumbled in moments later, unshaven, wild-eyed, his suit filthy from travel. He slammed a folder onto the table. "You've made a terrible mistake, Lena. I have a better offer. $75 million from a European mining syndicate." "You're throwing away millions." "Really?" Lena asked coolly. "May I see the paperwork?" He hesitated a beat too long. "Their lawyers are finalizing it." "Of course they are," she said softly, sliding her signed Mountain View contract toward him. "Unfortunately, I've already closed the deal." Torres's composure cracked. "You idiot! You cost yourself $35 million, or saved myself from you." The door opened again, this time revealing Agent Park and 2 FBI officers. "Vincent Torres," Park said, raising his badge. "You're under arrest for escape, fraud, and attempted extortion." As the cuffs clicked shut, Torres glared at her. "You think you won? That money will ruin you. It ruins everyone who touches it." Lena met his gaze steadily. "Then I'll make sure it ruins the right people." He was dragged out, shouting, until the door closed behind him. The room stayed silent for a moment. Then Robert exhaled shakily. "You played him perfectly." "No," Lena said, her father's voice echoing in her memory. "Dad did. I just finished what he started." Outside, the sunlight broke through the clouds, flooding the office in gold. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt earned. 6 months later, the world had shifted. The once quiet farmhouse now hummed with renewal, not from chaos, but from progress. Solar panels gleamed on the barn roof. The fields were green again, and for the first time, Lena could breathe without feeling watched. The call from Agent Park came that morning. "Torres was sentenced today," he said. 22 years in federal prison. His nephew got 15, and because of your cooperation, we secured restitution for every family they destroyed." Lena closed her eyes, a quiet wave of relief washing through her. "So it's over." "Legally, yes," Park replied. "But morally, you finished what your father started. That's rarer than you think." After hanging up, she wandered into her father's old study. The morning sun fell across his worn desk, illuminating the framed photo of them from years ago. A little girl on his shoulders, both laughing, free of the weight that would come later. Robert entered quietly, wiping his hands on his work jeans. "The first royalty check came," he said, setting an envelope on the desk. $200,000. "We did it, Lena." She smiled faintly. "We did." Robert hesitated, then added, "Dad would have been proud." Lena nodded, fingers brushing the envelope. Not for the money. For the choices. They stood together in the sunlight, not heirs anymore, but partners, rebuilt from the wreckage. The past had taken their piece, but not their purpose. Outside, The wind moved through the lilac trees, carrying the faint scent of renewal. Justice had come quietly, not in fire or fury, but in the calm certainty of righting what was wrong. And for the first time in her life, Lena Hartwell finally felt free. Spring settled over Millfield like forgiveness. The fields shimmered with new growth, and the farmhouse, once a place of quiet sorrow, now carried the sounds of life again. Robert had taken over the construction company full-time, trading conference calls and city skylines for lumber, soil, and the satisfaction of work that built rather than consumed. He laughed more now, genuinely, freely, and sometimes Lena caught glimpses of the boy he'd once been, the one who followed their father around with a toy hammer. One afternoon, he arrived carrying a stack of legal folders. "I've been talking with Mr. Mitchell," he said. "I'm setting up a trust for Madison, my daughter. I want you to be her trustee if anything ever happens to me." Lena blinked, surprised. "Robert, that's a lot of responsibility." He smiled faintly. "You already carried this family through worse. You'll make sure she grows up knowing what matters, not the money, but how to use it wisely." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but I'm holding you to the part about teaching her what matters." A few weeks later, Madison came to visit, bright-eyed, endlessly curious. She followed Lena around the farmhouse, asking about everything: the creaky staircase, the lilac trees, the shiny panels on the barn. "Daddy says you're rich now," Madison said innocently as they planted tomatoes together. "Because Grandpa left you special dirt." Lena laughed softly. "Something like that, sweetheart. But the real treasure isn't in the dirt, it's in the roots." When Madison tilted her head, confused, Lena added gently, "It means you have to take care of what's underneath, the things that keep everything else alive." That night, the three of them sat on the porch, watching the stars shimmer above the fields where generations of Hartwells had worked, failed, and rebuilt. "I think Dad was right," Robert said quietly. "We weren't ready to inherit money. We needed to inherit perspective first." Lena smiled. "And now that we finally understand that, maybe we can build something worth leaving behind." The wind swept across the lilacs, carrying the scent of renewal. And this time, it didn't smell like endings. It smelled like legacy. Months later, the farmhouse stood stronger than ever, the perfect balance of history and renewal. The morning light streamed through the old windows, catching on the framed letter Lena had hung above her father's desk. His handwriting, steady, familiar, seemed to watch over everything they had rebuilt. The mining royalties came in steady waves, but the money no longer defined her. What mattered now was what it allowed her to preserve: the land, the business, the dignity her father had fought for. Robert ran the construction company with humility and purpose, and Madison grew up surrounded by stories of honesty, not greed. One evening, as the sun melted into the fields, Lena stood by the porch rail, a mug of tea warming her hands. The wind carried the faint scent of lilacs, her father's favorite. She thought about everything he'd left behind. Not the money, not the mineral rights, but wisdom. The lesson that real wealth isn't measured in what you earn, but in what you protect. He had been right all along. Patience builds empires. Greed burns them down, and sometimes, love doesn't mean giving someone what they want. It means stopping them from destroying themselves to get it. Lena smiled softly as Madison ran through the yard, laughter echoing into the fading light. Her father's greatest gift wasn't fortune. It was foresight, the courage to build a legacy meant to last beyond one lifetime. And in that moment, Lena knew she hadn't just inherited land or money. She had inherited clarity. Message for the listeners. True wealth isn't about money. It's about protecting what matters most. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're love in its strongest form, and sometimes, the quiet ones, the patient ones, are the ones who save the family from falling apart. So be patient, be wise, and when life tests your loyalty, choose integrity over impulse. That's where real power lives.